Hi and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Top 10 Star Trek Klingon episodes. So this video is where I count down my top 10 favorite episodes from all 5 Star Trek series, the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise, and also all of the Star Trek movies, and name my top 10 favorite episodes that feature or are centered around the Klingons. In this top 10, I rank episodes not on how I feel about them overall, but how I feel specifically about the Klingon storyline and what I think is the best depiction of Klingons in Star Trek. So as always, I'll start my video by naming my 5 least favorite Klingon episodes. So these are the 5 Klingon episodes I think are the worst. Starting with number 5, Sons and Daughters. This 6th season Deep Space Nine episode took place during the awesome station occupation arc, but was by far the low point of that storyline as they proceeded to completely destroy Alexander's character by aging him up by like 10 years and making him act like an incompetent moron who all of a sudden wants to be a warrior, which could not possibly be more inconsistent with what was established about him. And all this for the sake of an over-the-top cheese factor storyline. Number 4 is the Sword of Kahless, the 4th season Deep Space Nine episode where Worf, Dax, and Kor go off on an adventure to find the fabled artifact, which was the Sword of Kahless, that somehow ended up in the Gamma Quadrant. So this was a horrible and blatant attempt to rip off the search for the Holy Grail type stories that turned into cliched storyline that has been done a million times before about gold fever, where companions in search of treasure start to turn on each other and go mad with greed. A hashtag of tired rehashes with nothing to hold on to. Number 3 is Friday's Child. This 2nd season original series episode was the original series, one of the original series many 2nd season episodes that attempted to be more like a Western, which were really popular at the time in order to draw audiences in, and what it ended up doing was creating a subpar knockoff that completely lost its edge of originality. These natives were so obviously meant to be Native Americans, and the Klingons were the typical sleazy competitor. It was just a bad episode. Number 2 is The Barge of the Dead, the 6th season episode of Voyager that tried to ramp up the ratings by bringing the Klingons back in this absurd dream sequence where B'Elanna had a vision of her dead mother after a near-death experience. This episode seemed shoehorned in that didn't really connect with the rest of B'Elanna's storyline, and dealing with the Klingon religion in a supernatural manner that was open-ended, which was just horrible. And my number 1 worst Star Trek Klingon episode is Star Trek V: The Final Frontier. Yes, a movie, and very easily the worst Star Trek movie ever made. This was also the worst portrayal of the Klingons ever to appear on screen, as in this film they came off as a bunch of incompetent schoolyard bullies. I mean, seriously, this guy isn't even as bright as Biff from Back to the Future, as the storyline just revolves on the Klingon ship deciding to kill Kirk because of his reputation and for the fun of it. He wants to be cool, that's why, basically. And that was so paper thin. And then at the end, when the Klingon ambassador scolds him, he goes up to Kirk and goes, "I apologize." Just like a teacher would make a schoolyard bully do. This movie was just horrible. So enough negativity. Let me get to my favorite Star Trek Klingon episodes. But before I get into my top 10 episodes, let me name a few honorable mentions that didn't quite make my list, but nearly did, as I wanted to, so I want to briefly mention them. First is the Emmisary, the 2nd season Next Generation episode, where we meet Worf's old fling, a half-human, half-Klingon named Kalar, who comes on board to deal with a crisis where a Klingon sleeper ship from the past may attack Federation outposts. Next is Soldiers of the Empire, the 5th season Deep Space Nine episode where Martok, newly back from spending over a year in the Dominion intern camp, gets command of a ship and requests Worf to be his first officer on a mission to attack the Dominion, and Dax comes along as well to find a crew that's battle-weary and ready to mutiny. And finally is Apocalypse Rising, the 5th season Deep Space Nine premiere, where the Klingons are at war with the Federation, but Sisko suspects it's because Gowron is a changeling, so he, O'Brien, and Odo disguise themselves as Klingon and, along with Worf, go undercover to expose him. So now let me get to my top 10 favorite Klingon episodes, starting with my number 10, Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. Now, I know Star Trek The Motion Picture was the first time we saw Klingon foreheads, which would become the signature look of the Klingon, and heard the Klingon language spoken, and saw them behaving more like a warrior race, but that was only a brief appearance. The Search for Spock was the first time we saw them as a full-on adversary in this new role, and a year before he became Doc Brown, we get to see Christopher Lloyd playing the main Klingon villain, Kruge. Now, some may accuse his performance and character of being a bit hammy, but it was particularly good ham. I do think the Klingons would not have blown up in the Star Trek universe as much as they did if not for this movie, as this would go on to define what we think of the Klingons, and I think there's a reason for that, as their portrayal here was damn good. Number 9 is Day of the Dove, the 3rd season original series episode, which predates the movies as the first time we see the Klingons act more like a warrior culture, as prior to this they resembled Ferengi more than they did Klingons by being like lying and devious. In this episode they really came off more as a samurai type culture, more concerned with war and honor. And this episode itself was quite interesting, where Kirk was forced to make peace with them in order to avoid an eternity of endless, pointless fighting at the hands of an alien who feeds off of war and hostile feelings, which is a nice analogy for the dangers of prolonged warfare. Number 8 is Sons of the Father, the 3rd season Next Generation episode that begins with the Enterprise getting a new Klingon first officer who has to restrain himself from killing people, but later we find he is actually Worf's brother that Worf never knew he had, and he went there to test to see if Worf was still a warrior because he needed him to deal with the fact that the deceased father is being branded as a traitor to the Empire. This was one of the first great Klingon episodes of the Next Generation, which led to an awesome series of them that went beyond the movies to cement the Klingons as fan favorites in the Next Generation universe. It was also great at exploring Worf's character and his connection to his people. Number 7 is Errand of Mercy, the 1st season original series episode and first ever appearance of the Klingons, where the Klingons and Starfleet are about to go to war, so Kirk and Spock go to a strategically important planet to try to convince the natives there to side with the Federation, but cannot, and while he's there, the Klingons occupy the world and the war begins. Although the Klingons in this episode don't necessarily behave like the Klingons we know and love today, this was still a great introduction, as they came off as a super cunning and totally brutal enemy for Kirk and crew to overcome. I can really see why that they kept them around after this. And this episode itself had one of the best endings, as they discovered the people of the planet they were fighting over were actually advanced energy beings that used their supreme powers to force a peace between the Federation and the Klingon Empire, which was another awesome anti-war allegory. Number 6 is Tacking into the Wind, the 7th season Deep Space Nine episode, a part of the ending storyline arc that saw Gowron squander the Klingon fleet in the Dominion War as he set up pointless attacks designed to make Martok look bad for political reasons, and Worf decides to challenge Gowron for leadership, and when he wins it, he gives it to Martok. So this was an awesome send-off to the Klingons in the modern Trek world as Deep Space Nine was nearing its end, and this was great to finally see the Worf-Gowron storyline resolved, with Worf getting sick of his dirty politics and placing, someone who actually had honor as the leader instead, so they could lead the Allied forces to victory against the Dominion. Number 5 is The Way of the Warrior, the 4th season Deep Space Nine premiere, where the station gets flooded with a fleet of Klingons and Sisko can't determine their purpose, so he calls up Starfleets and gets them to send Worf over to help find out, and he discovers the Klingons plan on invading Cardassia, which Starfleet is not okay with, so they strive to stop them, leading to some really epic battles. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the storyline where Deep Space Nine made the Klingons hostile to the Federation again. I didn't really think it worked. However, it did really work for this one episode, and I feel they should have just kept it contained to this one episode. And this episode was just intense with a lot of amazing battle sequences, and they managed to fit Worf and the Klingons right into Deep Space Nine world in the way that it didn't seem forced or out of place at all. It was seamless and great storytelling. Number 4 is The Mind's Eye, the 4th season Next Generation episode in which Geordi is brainwashed by the Romulans and sent to sabotage a peace mission with the Klingons in an attempt to damage the alliance between the Klingons and the Federation. I thought this was an amazingly dark, intense episode that was extremely intense, but it also shows a lot of the Klingon culture, and in a great way as it shows how uneasy their alliance with the Federation is, as some would rather have an alliance with the Romulans. Plus, it contains one of my favorite Star Trek quotes when the Klingon governor is accusing Picard of arming rebels against him. Picard says, "Well, you speak as if we're enemies and not allies." And he responds by saying, "And you speak the lies of a Tark." To which Picard responds by swearing at him in Klingon. I just love that scene. Plus, I get to go around saying, "You speak the lies of a Tark," all the time. Yeah, I know I'm a big geek, but it's fun. So, number 3 is Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Talk about great political thrillers involving the Klingons. This one is top-notch, that told the story of how the Federation and Klingon Empire ended their Cold War and became allies. That was used as an allegory for the end of the Cold War between the United States and Russia, which had just occurred. It was a very thoughtfully executed that featured a lot of well-timed suspense and action, and really explored Klingon culture as Kirk tried to get to know his enemy, which led from him hating them and wanting for them to die, to understanding them and believing in peace. We got to see the great Klingon trial system, which was epic, as well as the Enterprise square off against a seemingly unbeatable Klingon ship prototype, which was just super intense. Number 2 is Redemption. The 2-part episode that spanned from the finale of the 4th season to the premiere of the 5th season of The Next Generation was an awesome example of a Klingon civil war. Despite the fact that the battle scenes weren't that grand in terms of special effects, certainly not as lavish as like Dominion War sequences, as this was made before special effects advanced that far, it still contained some of the best battle scenarios in all of Star Trek, as they were held up by the strength of the characters and the awesome storytelling, as this tells the story of Worf clearing his family name by vowing to support the current Klingon Chancellor Gowron against the Duras family, because if they won the Klingon Empire, they would spurn the alliance with the Federation in favor of one with the Klingons. So Worf even quit Starfleet to fight in this war, as Starfleet refuses to get involved. However, Picard does set up a blockade to prevent the Romulans from providing aid to the Duras family, which was just an awesome storyline. This was an amazing exploration of Klingon culture and a great war to resolve, a great way to resolve the Worf dishonor story arc. And my number 1 favorite Star Trek Klingon episode is Reunion, the 4th season Next Generation episode that preceded Redemption, where the High Chancellor Kimpek dies as he's poisoned by one of the 2 candidates to succeed him, Gowron or Duras. So Picard must determine which one killed him and plans to make an alliance with the Romulans and not allow that person to rule the Klingon Empire. Meanwhile, we get a groundbreaking storyline where Worf is reunited with Ambassador Kalar to discover he has a son that she has been keeping hidden from him. However, out of concern for Worf's dishonor, she investigates it to discover that Duras was involved, which leads to him killing her. So, in an absolutely epic Klingon battle, Worf storms aboard Duras' ship and challenges him to a fight to the death, which he of course wins. This episode was not only suspenseful, filled with amazing political intrigue and action-packed, but also was highly emotionally powerful as Worf meets his son and the consequences seeing the mother of his son killed. It was such a harrowing scene, seeing Worf screaming over her dead body and telling Alexander to look upon death. One of the most powerful scenes in the entire Star Trek Next Generation series, making this my #1 favorite Star Trek Klingon episode. So that's it for my top 10 favorite Klingon episodes. Be sure to check out my channel for many more Star Trek videos, as I've done a lot of Star Trek top 10s, and I'm currently taking viewer requests for episode reviews. So if there's an episode from any of the 5 Star Trek series you'd like me to review, just leave a comment below with the episode you'd like me to review, but please 1 episode request per person. And be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.